If you follow these daily coding guides, then you know that there are many times where I'll pick out some type of coding interview question or create a challenge and then build it. And then there are other times where I want to showcase a gem, and that is going to be what I'm going to do in this guide because I've been getting a number of questions from students asking about how they can use phone numbers effectively in applications. Now, if you think of a phone number just as a series of 7 integers, then you're going to run into many different issues when you need to work with international phone numbers to be able to quickly grab an area code, to set up extensions, all the kinds of edge cases and the things that you may not think just right away when it comes to adding a phone number to an application. What we're going to work through today is the phone gem by Car, and I love showcasing these kind of gems because they really show what happens when the open source community not just creates a cool tool but also maintains it for an extended period of time. So if you look at the commits, you can see right here that this is being actively maintained. The code was updated as of 26 days ago, which is pretty cool. But then if you come all the way down, you can see that there are commits dating 7 years ago. So this is a great developer and a great team that has been able to do this and to create all kinds of cool features. And this is a great example of how you can leverage something that you know is going to be maintained. It's working with the latest versions of Ruby, and you can add it into your application. Now, it's not specific to Rails. This can work in pure Ruby or it can work in a Rails application, and as you'll see, it covers a number of very helpful edge cases. So if you scroll down, you'll see a number of things. I actually copied this straight into the code file, as you'll see here, just so you can have a reference in the file itself. This is the kind of the parsing tokens that you can use for grabbing things such as a country code or an area code from a phone object. And so essentially what's happening here is you can leverage this gem to create phone objects. So taking a look at this example, you can see that you can pass in a phone number and pass it into the module and then the parse method. And right here, you can grab it as a string if you want to have the entire phone number, but because it's a phone object, it can actually be used however you want. So if you want to format it in a specific way, then you can use each one of these tokens to parse it and then format it however you want. And we're going to do that in our guide. And I definitely recommend for you to go through the gem, look through a number of the other examples, especially if you want to work with phone numbers in your application. I've created 4 methods here. Now, in a real-life application, you probably wouldn't have to create separate methods because essentially all I'm doing is I'm wrapping them just to make it clear on what we're testing and what we're building out. The first one is this phone builder, and if you come down to the test and see what we're expecting, we're saying that it can properly build a phone number, which is essentially building a phone object. It expects to take in a number, an area code, a country code, and an extension. And notice here, one of the very cool things about this is, say that you took in a phone number or you had a form that took in a phone number in a Rails application, you can actually take in each one of these objects. You don't have to force the person to type in each one of them in a long string. You could actually just take them in and then use them like a key value kind of hash. And the way that I'm doing this one is, didn't mean to delete that. The way I'm doing this one is I set this up in the wrapper just like this. So how could we create a phone object by using this? Well, if I call the phoner, and that's the name of the module, and then the phone.new method, then what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to build this. Now, essentially, I'm really just, like I said, I'm using this method of phone builder just as a wrapper. In a real life application, you could just call phoner phone.new directly. And as you'll see, that's pretty much exactly what I'm doing. So I'm going to say number, and then in this case, all I'm going to be doing is passing in the actual value. So I'm going to say number is to number, area code is to area code, then country code is going to take in a country code, and lastly extension is going to take in an extension. And once again, this may seem weird. It's because I'm wrapping this up in methods just so we can use it. You can very easily just call this directly in your own application and bypass the entire, creating your own method part of it. Now, if I take this code here, and I'm going to put it right below the method just so we have kind of an easier way of reading it. And I'm going to have a phone object here, and what I can do, or what I should be able to do if this is set up right, is now I should be able to just call this phone object we created, and then I can ask it anything. So I can say, what is your area code? And it should give me the area code of 480. So let's run this and see if that's working, and that's working perfectly. So as you can see right here, what's cool about this is we are able to create a true phone object instead of just hard coding a set of numbers in. And take a look at the output of the phone object. So you can see we have this phoner phone object as its place in memory. It has a number, and because these are instance variables, these are items that we can call just like we called area code. So we could call the number by itself, we could call the area code like we did, country code, or the extension. So this is something that's very helpful. Remember when I said earlier where you want to be able to capture things like extensions. Say this is a office number and you're wondering, how can I store the user's extension? Well, this can cover that, where as opposed to if you had to do this yourself, you have to create all kinds of different objects and you'd have to do a lot of this work manually, and it can become very difficult when it comes to performing things such as data validations. So this is very helpful. Now that we have that, you may think, okay, that's fine, but technically this is really just kind of a regular object. I mean, we're passing a number, area code, country code, and extension, and then we're asking for it. We could create a struct and it would do the exact same thing, and you'd be 100% right. So let's now move on to some of the more interesting parts of that. So now we have a phone parser method. So how can we build a parser? So I'm going to say that I want to call phoner, then call phone, parse, and then it should take in a number. Like you can see here, same thing as above, I'm just wrapping this up, and so we can take the phone parser, and let's come down to our test example and just grab a valid phone number. So I'm going to copy this, and coming down here, I'm going to now clean it up. So instead of the test, we're actually using just the regular call. And this should say, we could say area code, we could say number, anything like that. So this is where it starts to get really cool. So before we were passing each one of those items in manually, which is fine, but like I said, that's something you could achieve by yourself. But now this one's a little bit more complicated, because here we're saying that we want the ability to pass in a long string of numbers, and we want to grab the area code. Now, if all of your users are from America, where you have this +1 international number, then that's fine. But if you have users from the UK or Australia or anywhere else in the world that has a different international number, then number 1 is going to be changed to something like 15 or something like that. And in which case, it's going to be much harder. You can't just say, oh, I want the the second through the fourth number. You can't do something like that because you would not be able to, you'd have to check against all of the international codes, which gets very difficult to check all of that and to have proper validations. But now if I run this code, you'll see that here, this gives us an area code of 602, which is the correct phone number. I grabbed a phone number from Arizona, and so it picked it up. It recognized that 1 was the international number, so it's in the US, and then 602 is the area code, and it instantly grabbed that. So that's really cool that it can actually parse the number, run it through the object, and then be able to see what exactly needs to be done. So that is on the phone parser. So that's starting to get into some cool things. Now the next one is really fun. This is one that I have personally used in a number of applications, and I think will be one that you may want to use as well if you're working with phone numbers. And this is the phone formatter option. So with this, I'm going to call the same thing, phoner, phone, and then I'm going to pass in the parse method and then pass in the number that I'm wanting to parse, or I should say the number that I'm wanting to format, and then call .format on it. And now this is where we get into all of these items up here. So all of these format extensions and country codes and everything like that, this is where this is going to come in really helpful. So if I come here to format, format takes an argument which is whatever format we want to use. So inside of double quotes, I'm going to pass in that I want to have kind of a traditional formatted phone number where I have the area code in parentheses followed by the first 3 digits followed by a dash followed by the last 4, and we can grab each one of those items. So I'm going to start off with %A, then close the parentheses, give a space, and then %F, which is going to give us the first 3 digits of the number, dash, and then %L, which is going to give us the last 4 digits. And if you look down at the test, you can see exactly what we're looking to do with this format. We're expecting to pass in a traditional phone number, and then we want to parse it and to format it so that it can convert it into this more traditional looking type of format. So now if I come up and let's actually let me come down and grab this code just like I want it. So I'm going to paste this in and just call it exactly the way that I want it to be. So I'm going to say phone formatter. And this one is one where even though I have the wrapper method, this is kind of cool to just call phone formatter and I don't even have to type any of this in. So this is, out of all of these examples, this is one where in a real life application, I probably would do something like this. I would most likely, if I was in a Rails application, I would use, or I'd create a helper method or a view helper method, and then I would create a phone formatter method, and then I could just call it from anywhere within the view and then have it. I wouldn't have to remember the parse method or call the module and the class and then call format and then pass in all of these formatting values. That would start to get really messy if I tried to do that in a view and would be a poor practice. And so this is one where this would come in really handy. I can just call phone formatter, pass in the number, and then it'll do the rest of the work for me. So now if I run this code and come down to line 34, you can see that this worked beautifully. So right here, I passed in a huge phone number that was really ugly, not formatted at all, and it converted it. It first parsed it, so it was able to know which items were the area code, and then it was able to take the numbers, and then I was able to split those however I needed, and now I have a perfectly formatted item. And notice, I didn't have to do any string interpolation, I didn't have to perform regular expressions, I didn't have to do anything like that. By leveraging the phone module, I was able to simply pass it in, tell it what format I wanted, and it worked nicely. So we have one more method, and this is going to be the phone valid. And this is very helpful when it comes to performing validations, because I can tell you from experience, if you are working especially with international applications, then if you want to check to see if a phone number is valid, this can be a very painful process, because you need to, first, you'll need to know all of the available international codes that are out there. Then you're going to have to perform regular expressions to be able to verify that there are the correct number of digits and all those kind of things. And that can definitely be a little bit on the challenging side. So instead, I can just call the phoner module, pass the phone class to it, and then there is a valid method, valid with a question mark. So if you know your Ruby, you know that this should return a true or false value, and then you just pass the number to it. And if you come down to the test, you can see that what the expectation here is you should be able to pass in any phone number and it should give you a true or false value. So if I take this and let me clean it up. So this one should be true. And I'm going to run this to verify it. And you can see, yes, on line 40, you can see that that is true, which is perfect. Now, if I come back here and I just pass in just a huge string, then if I run this again, you can see that now it's false. So we can, with some pretty good confidence, we can pass in numbers and check to see if they're valid phone numbers or if they're not, which can be incredibly helpful when you're doing things such as creating user accounts and you want to let the user know if they maybe mistyped a few numbers or if they accidentally typed a character in or anything like that. Instead of having to get really deep into regular expressions, you can simply call this, check and see if it's valid. If it is, then you're good to go, and if not, then you can tell them to fix their errors. So I'm going to close that out, and on the right hand side I'm going to run the RSpec test. So this is for March 9th, I believe. If I run this, yes, perfect. So we have 4 examples and 0 failures. So this is pretty cool. That means that we have the ability, by leveraging the phone gem, to verify if a phone number is valid, to perform any kind of formatting we want on a phone object, to parse a phone number and extract specific values out of it, and to manually build an object from scratch. So very nice job if you went through that. I know that was a little bit longer exercise than normal, but hopefully it can give you a little bit of a taste for how powerful the phone gem is.